You know, for half a century now, one of America's most chilling cold cases has been defined by this single, bizarre pattern. We're talking about a series of unsolved crimes that absolutely terrified a community and left behind a trail of coincidences so strange they still haunt investigators to this day. So let's get into it. This is the story of the Alphabet Murder. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in Rochester, New York, and the years are 1971 to 1973. This is when a kind of shadow just fell over the whole city. Over the course of just 2 years, 3 young girls were abducted and then brutally murdered. And it seemed completely random. You can just imagine the fear that gripped the community, the feeling that any child could be next. But here's the thing. These weren't just random acts of violence. Police pretty quickly realized there was a thread, something connecting these horrific crimes. And it was something so specific, so strange, it was almost unbelievable. So the central question became, what was the killer's bizarre signature? What was this pattern? And this is the chilling pattern that gave the case its name. I mean, check this out. Each victim had alliterative initials. You know, their first and last name started with the same letter. But it didn't even stop there. The town where each girl's body was found also started with that same letter. Yet Carmen Colón, found near Churchville, Wanda Walkowicz in Webster, and Michelle Maenza in Macedon. I mean, come on, that's a coincidence that's just way too perfect to ignore.
So behind all the headlines and this really eerie pattern, we have to remember the real victims. 3 little girls whose lives were just cut way too short. To really get the gravity of this case, we have to know who they were. So let's start there with the stories of Carmen, Wanda, and Michelle.
First up was 10-year-old Carmen Colón. So on November 16th, 1971, she begged her grandmother to let her run an errand all by herself for the very first time. Just a quick trip to a local pharmacy. You know, a classic "I'm a big kid now" moment. It was such a simple request, but it would end in absolute tragedy.
This timeline here just shows how fast everything went terribly wrong. Carmen leaves the pharmacy. She's seen getting into a car. And then, less than an hour later, this absolutely horrifying scene unfolds on Interstate 490. Multiple drivers saw a small child, partially undressed, running from a car, desperately trying to flag someone down, only to be violently dragged back inside by her abductor. It's just sickening. 2 days later, Carmen's body was found.
So for over a year, the community lived in this state of fear. And then it happened again. The second victim was 11-year-old Wanda Walkowicz. And just like Carmen, she vanished on April 2nd, 1973, while running a simple errand for her family.
Wanda made it to the store, she bought the groceries, but she never made it back home. A witness later said they saw her talking to the driver of a large, brown vehicle. The very next morning, her body was found dumped on the side of a highway. And get this, she was fully clothed. The killer had redressed her after the assault. Just incredibly disturbing. Okay, so now the city is on high alert, right? But the killer, he wasn't finished. 7 months later, on November 26, 1973, 11-year-old Michelle Maenza disappeared. The last time anyone saw her, she was walking alone after school, heading to a shopping mall to pick up a purse her mom had left behind. Now, Michelle's case had some really crucial witnesses. A motorist actually stopped to help a man who had a flat tire, only to see him get all nervous and push a young girl behind his back while physically blocking his license plate. Super suspicious. Later, a girl matching Michelle's description was seen in a fast food restaurant with a man, and this was actually backed up by forensic evidence. 2 days later, she too was found dead in a ditch. Okay, so with a third victim, police were now certain. They had a serial killer on their hands. The investigation just kicked into overdrive. Detectives started laying out all the evidence from all 3 cases, just desperately searching for those crucial links that would finally lead them to their man. And when you look at the evidence side by side like this, the connections really start to pop. All 3 girls were sexually assaulted and strangled. But it's the physical evidence that really stands out. You see it right there. Both Wanda and Michelle's bodies had traces of white cat fur on them. I mean, that's a very specific, very tangible link between the last 2 murders. Plus, they recovered DNA evidence from those 2 crime scenes as well.
Investigators also started building a victim profile. The girls weren't just similar in age, they all came from lower-income Catholic families, and they'd all been struggling recently, either with bullies or just with their schoolwork. And this led to a pretty compelling theory. What if the killer was someone in a position of trust? Maybe someone from a social service agency who used that status to lure these vulnerable children.
The investigation was just massive. We're talking over 800 people interviewed.
But out of all that chaos, the focus eventually narrowed down to 4 main persons of interest, and each one had their own really disturbing connections to the case.
So, the first major suspect had a direct link to the very first victim. His name was Michelle Colón, and he was Carmen Colón's uncle.
Now, the circumstantial evidence against Michelle Colón was, incredibly strong. He owned the right kind of car. He fled the country just days after the murder, even telling a friend he'd done something wrong. And he had no alibi. But, and this is a huge but, despite investigators tearing his car apart, they found 0 physical evidence. He ended up dying by suicide in 1991, taking any secrets he might have had to the grave.
Okay, suspect number 2 was a man who was already a monster hiding in plain sight. His name was Dennis Termini. By day, he was a Rochester firefighter, but by night, he was a serial predator known as the Garage.
And the case for Termini looked really compelling. He was active at the right time, drove a similar car, he lived near where Michelle Maenza was last seen, and, get this, police found white cat fur in his vehicle. It really seemed like a lock, right? But in 2007, his body was exhumed for DNA testing, and the result? It did not match the semen recovered from Wanda Walkowicz. Just like Colón, he also died by suicide. This was back in 1974 after a police chase.
All right, our next suspect is a name that true crime followers are going to recognize instantly. Kenneth Bianchi. Yeah, that Kenneth Bianchi. Before he became infamous for his crimes in another state, he was just an ice cream vendor in Rochester.
So, Bianchi worked near the locations of the first 2 murders, and he drove a similar car. And of course, his later crimes as one of the Hillside stranglers in LA proved he was more than capable of horrific violence against young women. But despite all that suspicion and intense questioning, he was never actually charged with the Alphabet murders, and he has always denied being involved.
And that brings us to our final, and maybe the most uncanny suspect of them all. Years later, a man named Joseph Nasso was arrested for a series of murders out in California, and his signature? Well, it was shockingly familiar.
So, Joseph Nasso lived in Rochester during the time of the murders. Decades later, he's convicted of killing 4 women in California, and here's the crazy part. All 4 of his victims had alliterative initials, just like the girls in Rochester. He was another alphabet killer. It seems impossible, right? But, just like with Termini, when they tested his DNA against the evidence from Wanda's body, it was not a match. So, after all these years, after so many compelling suspects, we're just left with this enduring mystery. You've got key persons of interest who are deceased, you've got a lack of preserved evidence from 2 of the victims, and you have DNA that excludes the most likely candidates from at least one of the murders. The whole case is just frozen in time. So, what are we supposed to make of all this? Was that alliterative pattern just a staggering, unbelievable coincidence that sent investigators chasing ghosts for half a century? Or was it the deliberate calling card of a meticulous killer? Someone who was never caught, who committed the perfect, taunting crime and then just vanished? That is the question that, even after all this time, remains.